Cold open. Dale Whitfield was 34 years old, divorced, and currently arguing with a vending machine that had eaten his last $2. He worked the night shift at a grain co-op in rural Nebraska, which mostly meant he watched silos and occasionally chased raccoons out of the feed bins. He'd been passed over for a promotion twice. His resume had exactly one skill listed under special abilities: forklift certified. So when the recruiter appeared in his kitchen, not knocked, not rang the doorbell, just appeared, sitting at his table like she'd always been there, Dale didn't scream. He just sighed and said, "You're going to want to use the front door next time, ma'am." She offered him a job, off-world, dangerous compensation, beyond his comprehension, details vague. Dale looked at his empty fridge, his overdue rent notice, and the raccoon-shaped hole in his siding. "Sure," he said. "When do we leave?" Warning scene. The recruitment officer, a tall woman in a gray suit who, Dale would later learn, wasn't remotely human, slid a datapad across the table with a contract nobody in their right mind should sign. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "I need you to understand the survival rate for this contract class is 11%, 11 out. Of every 100 humans we send, 89 come back in containment bags if they come back at all." Dale scratched the stubble on his jaw. "That's about the same odds as finding a parking spot at the Tractor Supply on Black Friday." She stared at him for a long moment, unsure whether that was a joke. "This is not a joke. Mr. Whitfield, the planet in question has killed every previous survey team sent to it. Full teams, trained teams." "Noted," Dale said, signing the contract without reading past page 1. She sighed, stamping the final seal. "Don't blame me if you come back in a box, Mr. Whitfield." Dale shrugged. "Cheaper than a funeral, I guess." Squad introduction. The briefing room aboard the transport ship Ansible's Reach held 4 chairs, 3 of which were already occupied by beings who looked like they'd stepped out of a recruitment poster for things that could kill you instantly. First was Thren Vaka, a Cathorian, 9 feet of corded gray muscle, twin retractable bone blades along each forearm, and a face like a rock slide that had learned to frown. Thren had survived the Kesserine Purge, a campaign so brutal that 3 governments still refused to discuss it in official records. Body count, classified but rumored to be in the low thousands personally. Second was Ixa Threll, a void-born navigator whose skin shimmered faintly violet and whose eyes had no visible pupils, just soft drifting light, like she was looking through you into some dimension the rest of the crew couldn't perceive. She'd charted 12 unmapped systems solo, 3 of which had swallowed previous survey ships whole. She hadn't lost a single crew member yet. Third was Dr. Paransay, a squat, 4-armed Mulvithi biologist covered in fine, sensor-laden fur that twitched constantly, reading environmental data no one else could perceive. Say had personally identified and neutralized 6 new bioweapon strains during the Outer Rim quarantine crisis. Say did not sleep. Say did not blink. Say had allegedly once diagnosed a plague from across a room. And then there was Dale. Average height, average build, a slight paunch from too many gas station burritos. No blades, no bioscanner fur, no navigational third eye. Just a flannel shirt, a thermos of bad coffee, and a NASA baseball cap he'd bought at a gift shop for $4. Thren looked him over the way you'd look at a puppy that had, wandered onto a battlefield. "This is the 4th operative?" Thren asked, translator crackling slightly on the word operative, like it didn't quite believe it either. "Species human," Ixa Threll said, consulting her datapad, drifting eyes narrowing slightly. "Designation Dale, no combat record, no survival training, no enhancement history. I got a merit badge in Cub Scouts," Dale offered. Not tying. Dr. Say's fur rippled in what Dale would later learn was the Mulvithi equivalent of visible concern. "This is concerning. This being appears entirely unmodified, baseline." "He's what they sent," said the recruitment officer's voice over the comm. "Tinny and final. Good luck." The comm cut out. The 4 of them sat in silence. Thren finally spoke. "Well, try not to die too quickly, small one." Dale unscrewed his thermos and took a sip of lukewarm coffee. "No promises?" Comedy escalation loop. "Gravity. The planet's gravity fluctuates violently," Ixa Threll explained, projecting a shuddering hollow model. Zones of triple standard gravity appear without warning. Our exosuits are rated for double at best. Dale nodded slowly. So like a bounce house that's trying to kill you. Thren's face didn't move. A what? Kid's inflatable thing. You jump around, sometimes you land wrong. Sometimes your cousin lands on your face. This sounds about the same, just bigger stakes. Dr. Say's fur bristled. The stakes, as you say, include compressed spinal fracture and organ displacement. Yeah, Dale said. Cousin Randy broke his wrist at my nephew's birthday party. We don't talk about the bounce house anymore. Atmosphere. The atmosphere contains suspended silicate particulate. Ixothrel continued. It shreds unprotected respiratory tissue in under 4 minutes. Our rebreathers use triple mesh filtration. Sounds like a Nebraska dust storm in July, Dale said. You just don't go outside without covering your face. My grandma used a bandana. Worked fine. A cloth, Thren said flatly. You are comparing a lung-shredding particulate storm to a cloth. Grandma never lost a lung, Dale said. Can your filtration say the same? Nobody answered that. Wildlife. There is an apex predator native to this biome, Dr. Say added. Fur twitching rapidly now. 6 meters at the shoulder. Acid saliva. Pack hunter. It has killed 11 survey teams outright. Dale considered this. Sounds like the neighbor's Rottweiler, Duke. Duke bit the mailman twice. We just started leaving the mail by the fence. This creature does not deliver mail, Dale, Thren growled. It delivers death. So does Duke, according to the mailman, Dale said. Difference is scale, not category. Temperature. Surface temperature swings 200 degrees between day and night cycles. Ixothrel said, voice tight with something like exasperation now. Our thermal suits are rated for half that range. Ah, Dale said. Like an Ohio parking lot. 95 in July, and if you leave a lawn chair out in January, it's basically a block of ice by morning. That is not remotely comparable, Dr. Say snapped. Fur standing fully on end. I've sat in both, Dale said. I'd take the parking lot. Terrain collapse. The ground itself is unstable, Thren said, jaw tight. Entire sections collapse into subterranean caverns without warning signs. We lost 2 scout drones to sinkholes in the last survey alone. Dale sipped his coffee. That's just a Midwest cornfield after a wet spring. You learn where not to drive the combine. Old man Feeney lost a whole tractor to a sinkhole once. Tractor's probably still down there. You are describing agricultural equipment falling into the earth as though it is normal, Ixothrel said, her drifting eyes for the first time looking almost unsettled. It happens enough that we got a name for it, Dale said. We call it Tuesday. Arrival and world reveal. The planet was called Kelvex 9 and it looked from orbit like a fresh bruise, mottled purples and sickly yellows, swirling beneath a churning ash-colored atmosphere, lightning arced constantly, between floating mineral formations that hadn't obeyed gravity and recorded memory. It was, by every objective metric the ship's sensors could produce, one of the most hostile environments in the surveyed galaxy. The drop pod hit the surface hard, kicking up a curtain of fine, glittering dust. The moment the hatch opened, Thren's suit display lit up red across the chest plate. Gravity spike. 2.8 standard compensating. His knees buckled slightly under the sudden weight, servos in his exosuit whining in protest. Ixothrel staggered a step, her navigational implants flaring with error. Warnings as the ambient electromagnetic interference scrambled her internal compass sense, the one thing she'd never once had to think about before. I cannot get a bearing. This has never... Dr. Say's fur was already matting down under a fine coat of silicate dust. Sensors screaming warnings about respiratory tissue damage in progress despite the triple mesh filtration. Dale stepped out of the pod in his flannel shirt and NASA cap, boots crunching in the purple dirt. He stopped, looked around, took a breath of the thin, gritty air. Smells like a demolition derby, he said. Your vitals, Say said, glancing down at a scanner with fur still bristling. Voice suddenly strange, are completely nominal. Feels a bit heavy, Dale admitted, rolling his shoulders. Like carrying 2 sacks of feed instead of 1, manageable. Thren's readout showed the gravity spike had knocked his suit's stabilizers into emergency mode. He looked at Dale, standing, unaided, unbothered, hands in his pockets, and said nothing. There was nothing efficient to say. The wind picked up, throwing a fresh sheet of silicate dust across the party. Say coughed inside the rebreather. Ixathrel flinched at another gravity fluctuation. Dale pulled his cap down a little further and squinted at the horizon. "So where's home base?" he asked. "I could use a coffee." Episodic danger montage. The gravity wells. The team's first assignment was mapping the shifting gravity zones between the base, camp, and a mineral deposit 3 kilometers out. Standard procedure required full exoskeletal reinforcement, magnetic boot clamps, and a 2-hour decompression prep before crossing even a single well. Thren led the team through in full gear, his suit groaning audibly as it fought a spike that hit 2.9 standard gravity. Ixathrel crawled the last 20 meters, her balance systems completely fried by the fluctuation. Dale walked through wearing his standard suit, unlatched boots, hands in his pockets. "You're supposed to clamp down before the threshold," Say said, aghast, watching Dale's sensor readout show a spike hit, and Dale simply slowed down a bit like a man walking into a strong headwind. "Feels like walking against a stiff wind off the lake," Dale said. "You just lean into it." "You cannot simply lean into a 2.9 gravity spike," Thren snapped, servos smoking faintly. "Worked," Dale said, shrugging. The acid rains. On the third day, the sky above base camp turned a deep bruised green, the telltale sign, Say explained through gritted teeth, of an incoming acid rain. Event capable of dissolving unprotected polymer in under 90 seconds. The squad scrambled into full seal shelter, sealing every gap, running emergency protocols. Ixathrel monitored atmospheric composition with visible tension in her shimmering skin. Thren triple-checked the shelter's seals with his bone blades, as if sheer will could reinforce titanium. Dale had been outside checking on a support strut. By the time the rain hit, he simply ducked under a rocky outcropping, pulled his cap brim low and waited it out with his thermos. When he strolled back into the shelter 20 minutes later, mildly damp Say's fur went rigid with alarm. "Your exposed skin. Bit of a sting," Dale said, examining a faint pink patch on his forearm. "Like a bad sunburn. I'll put some aloe on it if you got any." Ixathrel stared at the readout, confirming the rain's pH had registered as actively corrosive to steel. "That is not how acid works on organic tissue, Dale," she said slowly. "Guess my tissue didn't get the memo," Dale said. "Subject exposed to Class 3 corrosive precipitation for approximately 6 minutes without sealed protection. Expected outcome, severe dermal necrosis. Observed outcome, mild erythema, comparable to what the subject describes as sunburn. I have run the analysis 4 times. The results do not change. I am beginning to question whether my instruments are malfunctioning, or whether I simply do not understand what this creature is." The predator. The 6-meter apex predator Say had warned about finally showed itself on day 7, emerging from a rock formation near the water reclamation site with a low, bone-deep growl that shook loose dust from the cliffs above. Thren immediately drew his bone blades, stance shifting into a combat crouch honed across a war that had killed thousands. Ixathrel triggered the emergency beacon. Say began calculating the beast's likely attack, vectors based on prior survey, footage of its kills. Dale, who'd been refilling water canisters nearby, looked up, took in the creature's low posture and pinned back head frills, and calmly set down his canister. "Easy now," he said in the same voice he used on spooked cattle back home. "Nobody's rushing you." "Dale, get back!" Thren barked. The creature's frills flared, acidic drool sizzling against the rock. It took a step forward and then paused, head tilting as Dale simply stood his ground, hands loose at his sides. "Not advancing, not retreating. You're just protecting your den," Dale said. "I get it. We'll clear off your patch. No harm done." He backed away slow, unhurried, the same way he'd back away from a bull in a pasture. The creature watched him go, growled once more, and slunk back toward the rocks. Nobody spoke for a full minute after it was gone. "It could have killed you in one strike," Thren finally said. "Could have," Dale agreed. "Didn't, though. Same as most bulls if you don't spook 'em." The sinkhole collapse. By day 10, the team had lost 2 drones and nearly a support strut to sudden ground collapses. Entire meters of surface simply giving way into black subterranean caverns without warning. When the ground beneath the equipment shed buckled during a supply run, Ixathrel barely leapt clear, her navigational sense screaming too late to give proper warning. Thren caught the edge of a support beam with one arm, holding an entire collapsing wall of crates in place through raw strength alone while Say scrambled the last drone to safety. Dale, who'd been standing near the edge when it went, simply took one calm step backward as the ground gave way beneath his boot, shifted his weight, and rode the small shelf of collapsing dirt down about a foot before it stabilized. Like stepping off a curb he hadn't quite judged right. You just fell 3 feet into a structural cavity, HFY said, staring. More like stepping in a gopher hole, Dale said, climbing back out and dusting off his knees. Twisted my ankle worse doing that once chasing raccoons. Thren, still holding the beam, looked at Dale for a long moment. You are either the luckiest creature in this galaxy, he said, or something else entirely. Dale just shrugged and picked his thermos back up off the ground, checking it was still sealed. Bit of both, probably. Status flip. By the second week, something had shifted. When the ground trembled, Say's fur no longer bristled toward panic. It flicked toward Dale first, watching his reaction before trusting the readouts. When HFY's navigation failed in a gravity storm, she found herself falling into step behind Dale's unhurried, unbothered walk rather than her own scrambled instruments. Even Thren, who had spent a war learning to trust nothing but his own blades, had started positioning himself a half-step behind Dale on approach to unknown terrain, not because Dale was strong in any way they recognized, but because Dale was never wrong about which dangers actually mattered. He is not resistant to harm, Say noted quietly one evening, reviewing data by lantern light. He simply does not carry the same fear response, or the same threshold. Different, Thren said, watching Dale pour coffee like he hadn't just walked past a corpse flower plant that had liquefied a drone that morning. Not weak, just different. Cliffhanger close. On the 11th night, the base camp's proximity sensors went off, for the first time since landing. Not from wildlife, not from a gravity spike, not from weather, from something approaching, deliberately on foot. From the direction of a ruin none of the surveys had ever mapped. HFY's readouts flickered and died the moment the signal entered range, as though her instruments simply refused to process it. Thren's blade slid free without a word being spoken. Say's fur lay flat and still in the stillness. Dale would learn that meant true fear rather than mere alarm. Dale set down his thermos. Through the dust and dark, a shape resolved at the tree line, tall, still, watching them with a patience that felt older than the storm itself. Say, Dale said quietly, for once without a joke ready. What exactly is that? Dr. Say did not answer right away. I do not know, she finally admitted. The survey logs describe it only as the thing the planet is afraid of. The wind stopped. The shape took a single step forward,